At the sort of details of what we understand may be on the shopping list initially, particularly artillery pieces, and we've heard about how effective it has been in terms of outstripping Russian kit. But is there a danger if we go into further long-range weapons that the Russian would see this as being offensive rather than defensive?
Well, I'm not sure that's the case. I'm delighted that Rishi Sunak is in the Balkans. Hopefully he is visiting those troops who are on the front line, keeping us safe back here in this country. But also it's crucial that we maintain the support of the rest of NATO, and particularly those European countries, because Putin is now trying to fracture that support. He's trying to elongate this conflict. He thinks that if he can take the conflict into the middle of next year, then support from countries like Germany and France will waver, and ourselves, and of course the Americans, by the middle of next year will be thinking about elections, and then it will fracture. Putin, wants a stalemate, and I think we're at a tipping point. And the weaponry that you've talked about, this long-range artillery, It is making a difference. The Ukrainians are winning. And if we can enable them to win, particularly if we can enable them to take Crimea this winter, then that could well bring the Russians to the negotiation table. Right. So we must step it up at all costs.
However, we understand Kyiv hit again overnight this time with air raids. And again, it seems to be hitting infrastructure, power supply and so on. Are we giving the Ukrainians enough air defence equipment?
Well, we need to give them a range of capability, and certainly the air defence is key to protecting civilians and also protecting the infrastructure that we've discussed before. Putin is trying to turn the lights off and turn the heat off in Ukraine, and it's the weather there is getting pretty cold and freezing, and civilians are suffering terribly. So it's a range of capability. The air defence has been key. It would appear that the Ukrainian military are taking out between 75 and 80% of cruise missiles that are fired into places like Kyiv. But it's important that we keep that up and also give them the other weaponry like long-range artillery and the ammunition required so that they can keep prosecuting their advances throughout the winter, so that we can bring this to a close as quickly as possible, because the Russians, or Putin rather, is trying to elongate it, to fracture the support that hopefully the Prime Minister is negotiating with his other leaders in the Balkans at the moment.
And what do you make of this assessment that Putin might try again to go for Kyiv from the north and use Belarus and additional forces that they may actually supply to him?
Well, there's an awful lot of rumour going around at the moment. Yeah. And the fact that a lot of senior people in Putin's government are in Belarus at the moment and discussing these sort of plans. Who knows? It might be a ruse. We saw how they were defeated completely at the beginning of the war by trying to take Kyiv. I expect it is more a ruse to try and get the Ukrainians and NATO off balance. I am sure our intelligence is very, very good, and any move to the north or from the north would be picked up. So I expect it's slightly diversionary, but we must be on the balls of our feet all of the time. And we must give the Ukrainians all they need to prevail, because your previous discussions about the cost of living crisis and strikes in this country, quite frankly, it is the defeat of the Russians in Ukraine that will get us back on the level playing field, get inflation down and get the economy moving again. Quite frankly, if we don't achieve that, all the rest of it is virtually irrelevant.
Last thought on this. Clearly, there may have been some discussion behind closed doors, but what happens if and when Putin is defeated, or actually he is removed, perhaps by his own people in the Kremlin?
Well, I think generally that's what everybody hopes, but I'm sure a lot of other commentators have also suggested, we don't know what comes after Putin, and it's probably not going to be any better. However,
exactly.
The Russian military is pretty much defeated and, quite frankly, is no match for NATO anymore. So whoever comes in and replaces Putin, they are going to take over a defeated military and a broken military too. So it's very important that we continue to show unity across NATO and across Europe, and remain on the high ground and get a peace as soon as we can. And quite frankly, whoever replaces Putin, we will then need to deal with. But the Russians are going to be in a lot worse position than they were before this war started.